Welcome to Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery, a conversation held at the intersection of substance abuse, mental health, and everyday living. Your hosts, Marc and Justin Wolf, bring both professional expertise and personal understanding to the table. So welcome to the conversation. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. I'm your host, Justin Wolf, joined by my co-host, Marc. Marc, how you doing this evening, man?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'd be doing better if I made a smarter choice before leaving my house, because I just looked, I'm like, I am wearing a polo, and it is like 10 degrees outside.
That's what I was going to ask you. Let me see the guns.
Yeah, they got checked at customs. They didn't let me carry them. So
I'm dressed up. I got Under Armour on. I got my sweatshirt, and you're dressed like you're ready to go golfing.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to manifest it. That's all I'm just trying to do, man. So, dress for the elements. Like, I'm just glad I walked out of the house today with a friggin' jacket. So,
there you go.
That's why I set the bar, man. I set the bar low. Just that way, I can just, like, slide underneath it. That way, no issues.
In all seriousness, we're in the dog days of winter. Ending in January. Cold outside, but pitchers and catchers reporting about 2 weeks? 3 weeks?
Something about that. It's bright. Something to look forward to.
But then in Chicago baseball. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure you're about how about them White Sox?
Yeah. Less wins than last year, from what I read.
That would be quite the feat. That'd be impressive. But you're supposed to try to do that.
Hey, man, I'm a Southsider, true and true. They're going to have good years, they're going to have bad years. So it is what it is. I'm a lawyer.
Just accept it and move on. Awesome.
I'm a Chicago fan, Justin. Started being a but we were lucky. We've had some lucky years, too, some good years, too. So,
what was it, 2005 for you guys?
20 years this year. October 26th, 2005. Not that, it's a special day in my heart.
Yeah. It's fun. Like, thank you for saying that. Let me share this nugget of wisdom with you. Boom. White Sox championship.
At 10:47 p.m. Central Time, I believe. I'm just making up, man. I have no idea what time, and it was October 26th.
Just say it confidently. People will believe it. Like, oh, yeah, he's right. Mm-hmm.
In your face. So,
yeah.
It's real in, man.
Aye, Captain. So, yeah, I mean, I think this conversation is, we're kind of, like you said, we're coming towards the end here of January. And January is really taking on a life of its own here, especially when you talk about the movement of dry January and what that means and what that's looked like, and people kind of jumping in and just kind of experiencing what it's like to kind of give up alcohol for the month. And I thought today we just kind of go through and we talk about, like, what are some of those driving forces about, like, why that choice? Why is that decision made? What gets somebody to kind of like entertain the idea of, like, maybe I need to re-examine this relationship with alcohol I got, or maybe I just need to dry out for a bit, whatever that driving force is, or that justification, or that idea is in their mind. But also look at what are those benefits that come with this, right? Well, at the same time, noticing that, hey, like, maybe things in my life do get better. There's also going to be challenges that come apart with this, because we're talking about making a lifestyle change, and anything that's different naturally brings with it its own set of unique challenges that we have to face. And so, I mean, I think this is going to be a good conversation, because I think as you were kind of going through it and discussing this, we're also going to be kind of exploring, the relationship that people form with alcohol. And maybe that coming out of this, people will start to examine and start to have other thoughts about, maybe I need to not just look at January as that month of just really removing alcohol from my life, but also really kind of examine what is that relationship I have with alcohol. Because for, just in the work that I do and I see and I hear on a day in and day out basis, if we're going to talk about, like, alcohol is almost like a relationship, It's like you see people who are caught up in this abusive relationship who are constantly being gaslit by their drug of choice that it's going to be the remedy to all of their problems and maladies that they're experiencing. And yet, it is like pouring gasoline, or let's just kind of stick with the theme, or pouring alcohol on a burning flame. And what do we do? What happens when you do that? So, without further ado, Marc, I'm just kind of want to get your thoughts about kind of like what do you kind of say with Dry January, man?
Well, and from my understanding of it, from talking with people that I know that are participating in it, they're trying to give their body a break, or they're trying to give their liver a break because they went at it pretty hard during the holiday season, from, let's just say, Thanksgiving all the way through the end of the year. And I guess my comment to that is if you went that hard during that period of time that you feel you got to give your body a break, I think it's probably time that you look in the mirror, do some soul searching, and realizing that maybe a relationship with that particular drug, and alcohol is a drug, okay, isn't the best relationship. And maybe instead of just trying to be dry or sober for 1 month, maybe we should look at, like you said earlier, a lifestyle change where the momentum continues maybe throughout the course of the year and into a full-blown life of recovery. I can only speak from my perspective. Yes, I struggle with alcohol, but it's pretty well documented. My drug of choice was opiates, specifically prescription pain pills. It's the games that your mind plays. You try to prove to yourself that you're not that bad, or you're not an addict and you don't have a problem. I mean, there were times where people would come to me and say, man, hey, this is getting out of control. Well, it's not that bad. And you take some time off, but the problem is when you're taking that time off, you're counting down the days, the hours, and the minutes that you prove to yourself that, hey, I can abstain for a certain amount of time frame just to tie one on again.
Mm-hmm.
And, you see that with drugs, drug addicts. You see that with alcohol. Specifically, you see that during Lent, too. People that give up something for Lent. I know quite a bit of people that give up alcohol for Lent for that 40-day period. And they're counting the days down to Easter, and Easter Sunday rolls around, and they're basically having an alcoholic beverage with their hard-boiled eggs, their Easter eggs, in the morning for breakfast because they just couldn't wait for Easter Sunday to get here.
Yeah.
I think it's time to do some soul searching. If you got to stay dry for a period of time, give your body a break, and let your body heal from the perceived damage that was done during a time frame because you're tying one on pretty hard. That's my thought on it.
You got to the point, man, where it's like that old adage of like, hey, you think I got an issue with this? I'm going to prove it to you. Or better yet, I'm going to prove it myself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to go X amount of days, and this isn't going to be anywhere in my life at this point. Like, you think I have a problem with drinking? Cool. Watch this. Oh, we're going to Dry January. I'm not going to drink for 31 days. But I'm just going to, what I'm doing February 1st. It's because now I just showed you it's not an issue or it's not a problem, because like if it were a problem or an issue, I would not have been able to go that long without having it in my system. And then I'm just getting off. I'm just going. Like that's kind of how like my mind works. And that's how I've seen quite a few people do it. And I've also seen other people do it the other way, where it's like, like that break and that time away from alcohol really gave me the space and the mental clarity to really examine and look at what is this relationship I have with alcohol? What is it that's getting to the point where like I am naturally now thinking I need to kind of have a separation from this for a period of time to really examine what's going on with me, especially if it's impacting me in a way that I need to cut it out of my life for that period of time.
Yeah. It's a great time to do some soul searching, because when you're going at it pretty hard for a period of time, you have that brain fog, and your brain chemistry is a little out of whack. You have a little bit of period there where you're healing, okay, and that brain fog is kind of gone away. And I think overall, whether it's alcohol or substances, you go a period of time, specifically a month, without using your drug of choice. Not only are you going to have that brain fog gone, but you're going to actually feel pretty good. You're actually going to feel good. You're going to have more mental clarity. You're most likely going to feel better physically. You're not going to be lethargic during the day. And I think it's pretty safe to say, if you live in a family environment, that you might actually see your relationships at home improve a little bit as well.
Right.
So I think it's a good time to do some soul searching once that brain fog is gone, and really kind of figure out what your future is going to look like and what type of changes you're going to make on a more permanent basis to try to continue that momentum. Because everybody that I talk to that has abstained from alcohol for a period of time, whether it's this dry January or, as I said before, Lent or whatever it might be, that's the one thing that I've always heard is, man, my relationship with my significant other seems to be going really well. Well, why would you continue that?
No, it's true. It's like, hey, you cut this out. Now you have more energy, more time, more availability, and more of yourself available to other people in your life that are significant, right? Because I think a lot of times that can become a way to avoid, to escape, to push oneself actually to engage, whereas, you talk about like genuine and authentic interactions with another person. Like that's kind of like what alcohol robs you of, because it's influencing you, right? And people are saying that it influences and changes the way that you act and the way you respond. And I know that can be a really difficult thing, especially when you talk about like this time of year, and all those like social gatherings that are happening, and parties and workplace events, and figuring out, hey, it's dry January, and now I'm going back into these environments where I feel, a little bit, emotionally or personally uncomfortable, and everybody else is drinking here. What do I do in those moments? How do I politely turn drinks down? How do I say that this isn't what I'm doing when people might know me as being the complete opposite of what I'm really going to be presenting as during dry January, right?
Well, and they're also concerned with the perception too. Why aren't you drinking? Why aren't you drinking for this month? You got a problem?
Yeah. Right.
We're going to get that as well. And I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable talking about that or admitting that they have a problem. So they'll dodge and deflect, or guess what? They'll take that drink from their friend and they'll partake.
Right.
Because they want to avoid that perceived, if you want to call it, conflict or what have you.
And you say, I just think it's like stigma, right? It's all about like the stigma, because God forbid you say, hey, I do have a problem with this. This is an issue for me. The moment I take it, it just makes everything else in my life worse. So if you're somebody who's on my side and looking out for me, you would encourage and support that I'm making this choice. But that's not always the interaction, right? It's like almost a pseudo interrogation that people have to withstand and go through, because you're not drinking. Why aren't you drinking? You're okay. You're fine, right? It's almost like, yeah, I know you have 3 DUIs, but it's fine. Just drink. You're gonna be good, bro. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Well, let's just put it this way. Your true friends are going to welcome positive changes that you're looking to make in your life. And if somebody's trying to push a drink at you when you're out socially, when you have tried to make those positive changes, or you're in the process of making those positive changes, you need to do some soul searching and ask themselves, are they truly a friend, or are they just an acquaintance that likes to party with you?
Right.
Because trust me when I tell you, I had a lot of acquaintances during my party years. And once I got sober, scattered away.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your true friends are your true friends, and they're going to be there, and they're going to welcome those changes. They're going to compliment you of those changes, and they're going to give you they're going to give you motivation to be consistent with those changes moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was with me.
Right. And I think you kind of talked about a big point there, man. We kind of like highlighted, like, hey, that can bring with it though some loneliness. And you talk about like the doldrums of winter here, when it's dark out. It's early. It gets dark at like 4:00 now, and it's cold, and there's not as much to go outside and do, and kind of withholding from those activities now, because you're like, look, like I'm making this change. Like that can be a really difficult place to be if you're kind of trapped inside your own mind and no longer finding that group of like good friends who genuinely are also looking out for your best interest. You know what I mean? Like that can be a really dangerous place to kind of get your mind, especially when you're talking about like anxiety and depression, especially this time of year, with seasonal affective disorder being very tried and true because of just what naturally is happening in our environment. Like that, this is quite a big undertaking that people are taking to kind of pursue a dry January.
I look at it as kind of the opposite. You know, the holidays are over, all the social gatherings are over, you know, and there's usually, because of the weather here in the Chicagoland area, not a whole lot going on in the month of January and into February during those dog days of winter. And then spring starts to hit, and then you got your outdoor festivals and things like that. So the way I look at it is it's a perfect time to really try to focus on yourself, hone in on things, and make some changes. Because as we talked about many, many times before, 22 days for a habit, 100 days for a lifestyle. If you started in the month of January, by the time that first day rolls around in spring, which is what, March 21st, you're about 100 days into the year, you started to change your lifestyle. And now that's momentum you can take into those months where there is more social gatherings and you're going to be more equipped to have those conversations, be able to say no, and have more confidence about yourself. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Man, so you're highlighting like the importance of what you're needing to do is building new structure into your life, finding alternative activities to connect with, to really throw yourself into, to engage. And at the same time, you're going to build and foster other relationships with people. Really find those people who got your back and are in your corner. Because this is a significant change. We were talking about like changing your brain chemistry, right? Your mood's going to change. Your relationships with yourself and other people are going to start to look a little bit different. Like this is a profound, holistic change that can occur and start to take shape in a very short period of time when you think about a month.
And honestly, I really don't think you can name a negative. I mean, alcohol is an inflammatory. So if you wake up with aches and pains, you go 30, you've gone 31 days without alcohol and you continue that momentum, you're going to have less aches and pains. You're probably going to lose a few pounds because we know the effect that alcohol does on your digestive system. But more importantly, you're not out getting a friggin' burrito or a crate case at White Castles at friggin' 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. You're actually in bed at a decent time, and you're not going to be eating all that greasy, fat food in the middle of the night. Okay, so you're probably going to drop a few pounds during that time. You're going to have better relationships at home with your significant other. You're probably going to have better relationships with your kids because you're not out on the weekends. Maybe you're having better quality family time depending on the age of your kids. You're going to be more productive at work. And at the end of the day, you're going to find out, who your true friends are and whose acquaintances and make, and be cognizant of that because that brain fog is out of the picture and really do some soul searching as far as like who you want your circle to be moving forward. I mean, I know with me, like in early sobriety, I wanted the circle that was going to be completely supportive of my sobriety. That was important to me. They understood the battles I fought. They understand how hard I worked to get sober. They understand the lifestyle changes that I wanted to make. And they want to continue to push me to be better. And that's what I have around me right now. And I'm very thankful for that.
Definitely. I mean, and those are kind of like things that you worked really hard to kind of build and shape to kind of get in your corner that helps you kind of connect more with this world the way you want to be showing up. And I think there's a lot of challenges that come with all this that we're kind of talking about right now, because I'm just kind of thinking like you and I were talking about this like beforehand with some of these advertisements that are kind of coming out there for these non-alcoholic beers.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, all the buzz, none of the hangover. Like, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think what's happening is you're starting to see a pendulum shift. There was an article about Gen Z, about them being the most non-drinkers than any generation. So I think what you're seeing is you're seeing some marketing there, but I do think there's a sober movement that's going on out there right now. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it has to do with there are so many people that are battling with drugs and alcohol, and there's so many people that know somebody that's battled with drugs and alcohol or has passed away from drugs and alcohol that a lot of people, if you were a witness to that, are just kind of disgusted with that behavior, and you want no part in it whatsoever. If you saw that destruction personally, whether it be in your family or a friend or whatever it might be, so you start connecting the dots. I mean, you got non-alcohol wine bars that are starting to show up in the western suburbs of Chicago. You have a non-alcoholic microbrewery that was founded in Naperville by a gentleman that is a recovered alcoholic that's very active in AA, all 0%ers. I know up where I live, there's full sober bars, where all they serve is like mocktails and non-alcoholic beverages, and they have live music there and so forth. And then, you've had some stuff in the news, in the month of January. You got the Surgeon General lobbying or talking about putting warning labels on alcoholic beverages and the fact that it can cause certain cancers, which that data has been there for many, many years. But the fact that they're actually talking about putting that on there now, I think is a statement. I think people need to take that very serious. And then, yes, you just recently, and you and I were talking about this, you got companies out there now that are trying to market non-alcoholic drinks, 0% alcohol drinks, but supposedly give you the feeling of a buzz. Now, here's my challenge with that. It might be a 0% alcohol, which means you're not necessarily putting poison in your system that affects all those organs, because the way your body breaks down alcohol turns into ethanol inside your body. So you might as well be drinking a gallon of gasoline. Okay. But if you got some beverage that you're consuming that's giving you the quote unquote effects of a buzz, it has to be doing something with the brain chemistry. Okay. And if it has to be doing something with the brain chemistry, specifically the dopamine levels that give you that quote unquote euphoric feeling, my concern about that would be is what is the long-term consequences in regards to the brain chemistry? Is that going to lead to depression issues? Is that going to lead to anxiety issues? Very similar to, I guess, what alcohol does.
Right.
Okay. Because there has to be something in there that's affecting the brain chemistry to give you that euphoric feeling. So I'm not necessarily too keen on that. And honestly, being a recovered alcoholic, I'm not even too keen on the non-alcoholic wines or non-alcoholic beers, because I think that could be triggering as well. I mean, one time I drank a 0% alcohol beer, Heineken actually, and it was at a show, and it was just when the Heineken Zeros came out, and they were passing them out for free. And I'm like, I don't drink. It's a 0%. Was it a true 0%? Yeah, it's a true 0%. Man, I drank 2 of those things, and I'm like, you know what? No more, because I got that taste of that beer in my mouth, and it was just triggering. My mouth started to water a little bit. I wanted more and more, and I'm like, this is crazy. So I don't mess around with the non-alcoholic wines or the mocktails or the non-alcoholic beers. That's just my personal preference from my personal experience. But there's a movement that's going on out there right now, and I think that we need to be cognizant of that, because it doesn't take a genius to figure out. Start connecting the dots. You're seeing more and more of a pendulum shift to this sober living, if you will. And hopefully that momentum continues, because Lord knows the last couple of years there's been a lot of people struggling with alcohol and substances.
Oh, very true, 100%. And I think you kind of brought up a big point there that I thought was important, and in my mind it kind of resonated, because it's kind of like, hey, you see people taking more and more to get that desired effect, than the way it's going to impact their brain, and that's what's driving the behavior. I think when you kind of break it down, you look at, hey, what's the intention behind it? The intention behind choosing to drink this non-alcoholic drink that is still giving me a buzz is no different than me choosing with that intent to go drink that fifth of vodka, right? It's like I'm trying to get that same desired result, man.
Self-medication. You're trying to get away from your problems for a little bit, instead of fighting or addressing your problems head on, and using healthy coping skills that we've been talking about for the last almost 2 years on these podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I think it kind of defeats the purpose. That's just me.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's like a dangerous recipe to play with, because I think what you just shared, your own anecdote, man, your own experience, like Heineken Zero, your brain gets triggered. And I know this taste, I know this flavor, and I know what my natural inclination is to do when I got this. And it's a setup. It's one of those things, hey, risk and reward. At the end of the day, hey, reward is it's 0% alcohol. But the risk of me putting this into my system and the way in which I respond personally to having this in my system, it's not worth it.
Hey, it's weird sometimes how the brain works because I went to a concert back in January and I ordered a water and I just thought they were going to give me a plastic bottle of water and they gave me like a twist off aluminum cap, uh, aluminum bottle water. And when the guy handed it to me, it looked like a beer, like you go to like a ball game, like a White Sox game. It really looked just like a Miller Lite, just like I used to buy when I used to go to the White Sox games.
Yeah.
And I don't drink. I ordered a water. He goes, "This is water," and I'm like, "It is." Well, yeah, it's water. It says right in there. I'm like, "Okay, fine, whatever." Man, I went up to my seat to watch the rest of the concert. I'm sipping out of this thing. I'm holding it the exact same way that I used to hold the beer when I go to a White Sox game. And I'm like, this is just too weird. I mean, it started messing with my brain a little bit, and I had a hard time drinking that damn thing. You know, I mean, just the kind of the taste of like the aluminum or whatever. I mean, it's hard to explain. It reminded me of the kind of the same taste that was in a beer.
I mean, it's all the associations, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's just stuff. It's very familiar, right? It's like kind of building off like that familiarity that your mind is accustomed to.
Yeah,
It's a very dangerous recipe.
it is, especially if you struggled really, really bad with it. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, so I think that, I mean, right, there's kind of benefits and there's like a lot of risk here, like associated with dry January. And it's really being intentional and being aware of what your own personal stuff is that you're kind of bringing in when you're choosing to embark down this journey. And so I'm just kind of curious, man, for you, like, what your thoughts are. Like, what happens after dry January? Like, what's next for somebody after they've gone down and they've done this?
Well, what I would like to have happen, or what's probably going to happen.
Hey,
I mean, what's probably going to happen is they're going to go out there and they're probably going to get wasted the first weekend because they're probably counting down the days. I hate to tell you that, but that's probably true, and that goes back to what we said before. They most likely have a problem, but they're failing to admit they got a problem. What I would like to have happen, what I think should happen, is you build on the momentum. You know, you may
right.
change throughout the month, okay? You stay sober for the month of January. You know, now what can we incorporate in the month of February to take the next step? You know, whether that's dietary changes, whether that's some form of exercise, whether that's go to a support group meeting, you know, build on the momentum that you created. And let's try to change that into a lifestyle that you can be proud of, that you can move forward the rest of the year. Because I guarantee you, if you survive the whole month of January alcohol free, you can't mention one negative that happened to you unless you went through some type of form of withdrawals in early January, like, you know, through a mild detox
Right.
or whatever it would be. You know, and if you went through that, then you truly have a problem, and now you really got to do some soul searching because that's the equivalent of an opiate addict going through withdrawals the very first time, right? I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. I remember the first time I went through mild form of withdrawals, I'm like, this can't be. I'm not that bad. No,
Right.
it was bad. You know, I mean, it was mild, but I mean, you know, it just goes to tell you that was the progression of the disease of the addiction. So, yeah, what I would like to have happen is the momentum created. I think anytime that you have to prove to yourself that you can be alcohol, substance, or any addictive tendency, gambling, you know, gambling free for a period of time, you're pretty much subconsciously telling yourself that you drink too much, do too much of a certain substance, or gamble too much. I mean, you're pretty much telling yourself that. Okay. And different people do different things. We talked about Lent. We talked about dry January. Heck, I got a friend. He's got a calendar and he put X's on the days that he doesn't drink. And he'll call me up and be like, you need to be proud of me. I'm like, why? He goes, I got 15 X's. I said, 15 X's? There's 31 days in a month. That means you drink more than 50% of the time. You don't think you got a problem?
Right.
Some of those days I only had a couple glasses of wine or I had a beer, but I'm true to myself. So I didn't give myself an X even though I only had one beer. Well, if you're really being true to yourself, when you look at that calendar, start being true to yourself and realize there's some patterns here. Specifically, if you look at the last 12 months, you know, the calendar for 2024, let's count how many of the 366 days in 2024, because it was a leap year, you actually did not have an alcoholic beverage. Was it 50% of the time? Was it 60% of the time? Was it 40% of the time? I mean, guess what? Every single one of those percentages tells me you got a problem. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
you know, but they try to convince. It's like the disease. The disease will always play mind games with you to try to convince you that you don't have a problem or you're not as bad as people think that you are.
You know, or you find somebody who's worse off. Like, look, if I really had an issue, I would look like so and so. But I don't look like them. I'm good, right? And I think that's the part. Like, and you and I were talking about this before, where kind of like it just figures my mind where it's just like, oh, 30 days, like screw you. I'm not gonna show you I have a problem. Like this, I'm day 31, day 32. You know what I'm already planning on day 31 when I'm doing on February 1st, and then February 1st it's go time, because guess what? I got a whole month to show you it's not an issue. I just did it. And if it was a problem, I wouldn't be able to do that. But the mental obsession is there, and the fixation is there.
Absolutely. You know, I remember, and I've shared this story. I don't know if I've ever shared this on the podcast, but I know I share it in the group that we facilitate. The very first AE meeting I went to, two of my sales reps took me to this meeting, and you know, I actually walked in that meeting pretty much knowing that I had a problem, and this is good, and these guys are bringing me. I don't have to go by myself, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And I go in that room, and I'm hearing stories of divorce and strained relationship with kids and losing their job and DUIs and, you know, all this stuff that up until that point didn't happen to me. So I walked into the meeting thinking, this is good, I got a problem. I walked out of the meeting thinking, man, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. I'm doing right, man. Guess what? I don't know what the time frame was because it was all a blur. Probably somewhere between a year and 18 months, tops 18 months. Every single thing that I mentioned happened to me.
Yeah.
Where if I would have just actually been honest and true to myself, okay, I could have maybe avoided some of those things by getting the help that I needed. But my brain convinced me I'm not as bad as I thought I was because I didn't have all these issues that these other individuals had.
Right.
But if I would have truly paid attention to their story and what led to that point, and you focus on the similarities, not the differences, which is what I tell people right now, I had all the warning signs from the get-go. But our brain always wants to look at why we're different than somebody else, as opposed to focusing on the similarities. There's always similarities to the downward spiral, and there's always similarities in the recovery.
Yeah.
Everybody's recovery is different, but there typically is some base similarities. And I always talk about with the speaking that I do in the hospitals. I don't know how many speakers that I've talked with NAMI and so forth. I've never heard of a speaker not mention diet and exercise. Not one. So, not one.
Yeah.
So, but good stuff, Justin.
Definitely, man. And I think especially because I think we covered a lot here. We're talking about like dry January, like those things you can kind of gain from participating in it, those risks, what to be aware of, how to be really attuned to like yourself and where you're at, and also using this time to be big, like just honest with oneself about how did we get here, and also in that process identifying what are those next steps we're going to be taking on this journey. So, Marc, love the insight, love the personal examples you're able to share, man, as always. Then kind of give some life and some meat to our discussions here. So anything else you'd love to throw out there as we kind of wrap things up?
The only thing I want to wrap it up with is next time, since it'll be the middle of February, can you wear a tank top?
I'll make sure it's pink just for you.
There you go.
Make it salmon. All right. Well, yeah, we hope you're enjoying this discussions. Podcast there on the 15th and the 30th. Marc's loving himself on the other side here. It's wonderful. Look at him. Yep. Look at him there. He's smiling. It's adorable. And
that was for the comment about Chicago sports about a month ago.
Yeah.
That was one of my problems. Remember that?
I had a traumatic brain injury. I don't remember much. So
I remember it like yesterday.
Need to let that resentment go, man. Let it go. Oh. So Mark and I, as you can see here, we're open to all your comments and suggestions, so feel free to reach out to us at our website, NamiDoPage.com/podcast to connect with us. As always, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode. Until then, take care.
Thanks for joining us today on Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery. If you're on the journey to find guidance and insights, subscribe now wherever you find your podcasts. Healing Minds, Stories of Resiliency and Recovery is an educational resource, not a substitute for medical or therapeutic advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts and their guests are not necessarily those of Nami DuPage. Go to namidupage.org/podcast for links to past episodes, show notes, and to submit a question or topic ideas for a future episode. Until next time, be well.